And welcome everybody to another episode of Tidal Flooding Talk. I am meteorologist Joe Martucci here with my TFT team. That's like the TFTT. A lot of T's in that one. Dan Skeldon, Palma Shiles, and we are here just 2 weeks before Memorial Day. It really feels real. And Palma, we were saying off camera, like you always have to like really be cognizant of when May happens because it kind of just sneaks up on you, right?
It does. And I'll add one more T for you. Tuesdays.
Oh, you're right.
On Tuesdays with the team.
Oh my God. We should be sponsored by like Lipton Tea or something. The Lipton Tea, if you're listening, sponsor us. Dan, what's going on with you?
Oh, not much. Memorial Day early this year too, guys. So
yeah.
Going to be here before you know it, kick off summer, and I think everyone here hoping for a great one. They're all great, but we're hoping for an especially great one.
Yes, and we'll hope for a safe summer as well. And I'm doing that to segue us into our guest here for today. We have Chief of Police for Harvey, Cedars. We have Chief Robert Burnaford, friend of mine. We go back to early Preston Atlantic City days for me. But if you don't follow HC Police on Twitter, X, Instagram, all the socials, please do. A lot of great information if you're going to Harvey Cedars in Long Beach Island, but also just seeing what's going on in town. Some awesome sunrise, sunset photos, photos of snow on the beach. We're not going to talk about that for a few months. But with that being said, we welcome on Chief Burnaford to Tidal Flooding Talk. Thanks for being on here.
Hey, thanks, Joe. And thanks, everyone. Very happy to be here and looking forward to our conversation.
Absolutely. We'll start off just with the obvious. Summer's coming soon here. So, tidal flooding aside, what's it like for you during the month of May before Memorial Day? What's going on at police headquarters?
Yeah, so, all the police officers in the department, we look forward to summer just as much as everyone else does. So obviously Memorial Day weekend, the unofficial start of summer. This is something that we've been working since Labor Day, really, in planning and preparation to get the town and the department up to speed and ready to go so we can, properly serve the community once everyone arrives.
And how many officers are on your staff? And, I'm sure you're hiring some Class 1 or Class 2 officers. How does that break down?
Yeah, so we're a smaller agency, so we have 9 full-time officers all year round. And in the summertime, typically, depending on, various situations, we may have, 1, 2, or 3 Class 1s or Class 2s that we'll bring on.
Got it. So let's talk about this previous winter. We talked about this off camera, but the good news was there really wasn't a lot of tidal flooding in Harvey, Cedars, or anywhere at the shore. How do you think the winter went from a weather/flooding perspective?
Yeah, so I think you're right. I mean, we really lucked out. For a while there, we felt that every storm that came through or every weekend, it felt like at some point we were experiencing a lot of tidal flooding. But this time, Joe, like you mentioned, we were very fortunate. We were still prepared, for those various events, but we were very pleased to not have that many to go through.
Chief, what's the role of a police department now, when there are, let's just say, nuisance, minor flooding situations, or the more significant storms? What are some of the roles that your officers in your department, have to partake in a shore island community, when you're having these various degrees of tidal flooding episodes?
Yeah, sure. So that's a great question. So whether it's summertime or the wintertime, and whether we have 12,000 residents there or 500 in the wintertime, we're there to help. So it all starts with you guys, the professionals. Every day, whether it's going to be sunny or whether we're going to get a blizzard or a tropical storm, we rely on the expertise of you folks, so you can give us the forecast of what we're going to see. So it kind of starts with the forecast and the planning to see what's to come. And then once we start to do that, and once we got a feel for, okay, we're going to have a tidal flooding event coming up, we want to make sure we start to reach the community through the social media that we kind of spoke about a few minutes ago, really to try to, tell the residents, listen, this is being forecasted. It's not going to happen today. We have time. Let's be prepared. And then once that happens, and then, we know the low-lying areas in town, most, if not all communities and the leaders in those communities, they know their low-lying areas. So they know, who will be impacted most likely. So obviously we want to make sure we touch base with them. And then in the event that we have to then, respond to emergency in those situations, in those low-lying areas, we have to be prepared. So we have have two different high water vehicles that we have with the department, and we have a Hummer and we have a 5-ton vehicle. So again, we want to make sure those are up and running, and then we're fully staffed to make sure that we can go down and help someone in the event of those tidal flooding situations.
Now, how much do you prepare in advance with other departments or other agencies? Is, preparing for a coastal storm something that is discussed well in advance with your fire department, your OEM, and really any other agency that could assist?
Yep. So, it starts locally right in Harvey Cedars, where, our like you said, our OEM, our police department, our fire company, our elected officials, we meet regularly. So we're all on the same page, and we've been doing that for a long time. So that's really, we're really comfortable with that. And then of course, LBI, it's a few different towns in LBI with their own different police departments and their OEMs, but we communicate regularly, whether we have a weather event or not. So yes, we do coordinate with them. And then obviously we want to continue to coordinate with Stafford Township, because they're on the mainland side of us, and also with Ocean County Sheriff's Department and their OEM, because, we rely on them for their resources and their expertise. So to answer your question, yes, we all communicate very well. We all put egos aside. We all have similar issues when it comes to that. And as most know, for Long Beach Island, there's one way on and one way off. So if that comes to an evacuation of some sort, we need to make sure that we plan that accordingly.
Yeah, that was going to get into my next question. One way on, one way off, right? Route 72 over there. And I've seen when I've gone over the bridge from Stafford into LBI, sometimes, it floods even right there, right as soon as you get off the bridge. In your time in Harvey Cedars, what has been done, to improve upon it? Because I'm sure it probably would, it was still drivable for me, but I'm sure at one point it might have even been worse. Like, what have you seen over your time to improve that access way onto and off of the island?
Yeah, so for those who have been to Long Beach Island in the last few years, you've noticed a lot of construction that's been going on.
Yeah.
Some have felt that it's been longer than it should be, but that's not for me to say. But a lot of that has been to help the drainage in that area, right in Ship Bottom, kind of where you come onto Long Beach Island. And what we have seen that to be successful. So that's been huge, because a lot of the times, we have a tidal flooding situation in that area of Ship Bottom, which is a problem for us because we can't possibly maybe not get off the island. But in Harvey Cedars, we might be dry. So again, that kind of goes back to the point of we all need to communicate, because we might not be experiencing any tidal flooding issues per se at the time in Harvey Cedars, but in order for us to get off the island, we have to travel through Ship Bottom. So if they're experiencing tidal floods, we need to make sure we communicate. But thankfully, with the state and the others involved in that project there in Ship Bottom, it has certainly helped from at least from what I've seen during various flooding situations.
And just with the residents or the people who are there, right, in Harvey Cedars, I mean, what's that like, talking to them? Like, hey, it's not, no flooding here, but you're probably going to be going off the island at some point and it's flooding there. Is that something, like, how do you do that to the public? Yeah, so it's difficult, because then they'll ask you, well, do we leave or do we stay? Right. And sometimes in a situation, it's obviously it's safer to leave. Right. So we that's why we have those high water vehicles where during Sandy, right, where we helped people get off the island. And of course, if it's not safe to travel through an area like the Ship Bottom, then we wouldn't obviously encourage people to travel in areas where it wouldn't be safe. But that's where the planning comes in. A lot of these situations are predictable that we've seen. So we strongly encourage people to take the time and do it now, and make sure that you get off the island as soon as possible. Awesome. Good stuff. We're going to go to our first break here, and we'll come right back with Harvey Cedars Chief of Police, Robert Burnaford. Thanks to the New Jersey Coastal Coalition, your flood insurance bills are lower and your streets safer from the reality of flooding. Since beginning in 2013, we build more resilient shoreline communities. Our member towns develop and share in best practices that anticipate future concerns and create flooding solutions. From our town-specific free web app for flooding information to our weekly Tidal Flooding Talk show, we focus on flooding 24/7. Visit www.njcoastalcoalition.com for more.
Welcome back. You're watching Tidal Flooding Talk. We're brought to you by the New Jersey Coastal Coalition, and we are a nonprofit organization always trying to raise awareness about flooding. Now, we urge people to stay safe and act fast. Floodwaters are not just an inconvenience. They can cause fires, contamination, and serious structural damage. If severe flooding is expected and officials recommend evacuation, don't wait, just go. Have an emergency plan in place, prepare for the worst, and prioritize safety overall.
Awesome. All right, well,
Chief,
we're continuing our conversation here. Dan, sorry if you had a question, go right ahead.
I was just going to continue, a shore community is unique, because of that population change. You mentioned it in our first segment. You police hundreds of residents, the year-round residents in the winter, and it balloons to, I think you said 12,000 in the summertime.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
What's a more challenging time of year for you, or what's your busier time of year when it comes to tidal flooding? Is it the perhaps less knowledgeable of tidal flooding balloon of residents in the summer, but you don't have as many events, or is it more challenging in the winter when you have less population, but you have more nor'easters, more storms, and more flooding events?
That's a great question. And, the first thing I think about is, really it is the summertime because, our year-round residents, they know the deal. They're more informed. They most likely have been through it. They know where to go. They know what to do. So, obviously that does present some challenges too. But I would say certainly in the summertime when you have 12,000, people, some of those are first time, to the LBI or Harvey Cedars, and it's getting the information out to them. So do they follow our social media? Can they access our website? We have electronic variable message boards that we put out. So it's getting that word out to everybody. And, our year-round population, they see the importance or the significance of what's going to happen, where sometimes if they've never experienced this, you say, oh, okay, well, it's just a little water, but obviously all the other issues that come with that. So, and then also within a short amount of time, trying to explain a lot of that to someone who's here on vacation is a huge challenge.
Absolutely.
Just kind of a follow-up to that. And we asked this in our last episode we had with Trisha Hendricks and Kate May. Someone in Avalon, Scott Wolves, a borough administrator, he said, in Avalon, we have an average turnover of 9 years with the average homeowner. I don't know if you know the exact numbers, but does that seem about right to you? And if the answer is yes, that means that a lot of them weren't around when Sandy hit in 2012. How do you kind of reconcile the two?
Yeah, so I can't speak to the numbers, but what I can say is, yes, I see a lot of for sale signs going up for various reasons, whether it's market or whatnot. But there's enough turnover since Sandy that I would say there's certainly a good amount of people who did not experience that, so would not possibly know what to do or see the importance of the messages that we're trying to get out. So it is kind of every year and whether it's one resident or 100 residents, you always want to make sure that we reach everybody. So it's important to continually have that community outreach and not wait for an event to happen. So, we have a team of people that help with the community outreach of that. But that's why it's always important not just to wait to an event to happen, whether it's, knock on wood, hopefully a Sandy event doesn't happen anytime soon, and not wait to an event like that to try to get the word out to everybody. So continually, get that message out and make sure we have information available for everybody.
A good time to say that there's a 28% chance of New Jersey being within 50 miles of a tropical storm this year, and about a 9% chance of a hurricane. That's from Colorado State University. So fairly low odds, but it is a little above the average for us. So hopefully it just doesn't happen. We don't have to worry about it.
Yep, I agree with that.
Papa, your mic is off.
Sorry about that. Is there anything that you've learned along the way that maybe you weren't prepared for when you first became chief that now looking back you have improved and you're ready for the next coastal flooding event?
Yeah, the one thing is, that we continually work on and is just that planning and preparation. You might be kind of short-sighted at some points where you might only think of, I got to do this, this, and that. Well, now you really need to do this, that, and this, that. It just you have so much more that you need to look at, and you have to look outside the box also. You got to make sure, as we mentioned earlier about working with other towns, we're only as good as our teammates, right? And our teammates being the towns around us. So, again, it's just making sure that, yes, we are ready. We've always been prepared. And I'm not saying the other towns weren't, but it's just making sure that, yep, we're all on the same page. Yes, we're ready. Yes, our vehicles are fueled up. Our generators are fueled up. Our manpower is there and available. That's one thing a lot of people don't realize is, especially in our area where during Sandy, myself being one of them and another officer, we were evacuated from our homes, during that event. And so you have to keep that in consideration too. So there's just a lot of planning and preparation and just making sure that, that you dot all the I's and cross all the T's and utilize all your personnel to their fullest extent, because everyone wants to help, especially in emergency. Everybody's there and ready to go. So just making sure that you don't try to do it all on your own.
And what's it like, you do all the planning, you're well prepared for the storm, the storm hits, whether it be a hurricane or a nor'easter, what's the feeling like then? Like where do you ride out the storm, and, what's going through your mind when the storm's actually occurring and, let's say emergencies are popping up or could pop up? The planning's a long, arduous, kind of year-round, never-ending process. But what's going through your mind when the storm's actually going on?
Yeah, so that just brings me back to Sandy, where I was at the firehouse in Harvey, Cedars when the storm hit, and everyone was told to evacuate. And as the eye of the storm came around, and then the wind switched, it's when the ocean started to breach the dunes and come into the boulevard. That's when we start getting 911 calls. And at that time, we had to make a decision. Do we put the first responders at risk to try to get into a situation where may be unsafe for them, to go out and help these people, or turn around and get back to safety. So so once the storm hits, you just hope that everyone did listen to the evacuations, if they were in place at that time, and you just really hope that once the storm passes, everything is not as bad as you had planned for. So you kind of hope, plan for the worst and hope for the best. But you kind of there's not really much you can do sometimes in a severe storm. You can kind of just have to wait it out and hope for the best.
Evacuating LBI, something that doesn't happen often, thankfully. But is there an order into how you're supposed to evacuate? And if so, where is Harvey Cedars on that list? And for people who are watching, Harvey Cedars is pretty far north in Long Beach Island, pretty close to the tip.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So when for OEM and the officials, when we called for the evacuation, we didn't set, okay, Harvey Cedars, you're up today, or Surf City, you're up tomorrow. We gave ample time so that it could be done in an orderly fashion. The one thing that I think we struggled with a little bit during Sandy was, I can't remember exactly what storm it was before that, where we did call for an evacuation because of the forecasted models were to be a significant event.
Probably Irene, 2011.
Yes. Yeah. Thank you. And what happened? It wasn't much of an event. So now, if as us, as the emergency management officials, we're asking, people to leave because of storm coming, and then a storm doesn't come. And now Sandy comes and we say, hey, a storm's coming, you have to leave. And then, so it took a little bit more convincing for everyone to leave, which the majority of people did. It just took a little bit more convincing. So, we'd never take evacuations lightly. We don't just do it, unless there's a good reason to keep everybody safe.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the big questions that we'll never know. What happened if Irene didn't happen and only Sandy happened? How would things be different? Would they be different? Probably so, but we'll never know. Anyway, we'll take our final break here. We'll come back on the other side with Tidal Flooding Talk.
what the Down Beach Seafood Fest is all about. It's about community, it's about friends, it's about culture, right? The food culture in Atlantic County is rich.
Welcome back to this third and final segment of this week's Tidal Flooding Talk, proudly brought to you by the New Jersey Coastal Coalition. Here with Chief Robert Burnaford from the Harvey Cedars Police Department. Continuing our discussion, Chief, you mentioned earlier, responding to vehicles, let's say, or emergencies, vehicles that get stuck in water, or flooded residents that may be trapped. There's that old National Weather Service moniker, turn around, don't drown, right? A lot of people don't turn around. They try to drive through floodwaters, which you should never do unless perhaps you have one of those high water vehicles that you guys mentioned earlier. What's it like? How big of a tool is that in responding to emergencies?
Yeah, it's huge. We're so fortunate to be able to have those vehicles at our disposal, because it doesn't take much for any SUV or sedan that someone may own to get stuck in a flooded situation. That's why the old adage of turn around, don't drown. So have these high water vehicles where we can go through feet, 5, 6, many feet of water, to get to where we have to go without really any hesitation. But again, that's why, the old saying too, you leave it to the professionals. We strongly encourage people to evacuate when they can, get themselves out of the low-lying areas ahead of the flooding situation. And then if they can't, let us come help you.
What's it like actually in that high water vehicle? I'm sure you've been in it a few times. You got any stories for us about that?
Yeah, it's cool, right? You're driving around in these big things, but at the time you're not thinking about that. You're thinking about the mission on hand. But it's just nice to be in a piece of equipment, knowing that you're gonna be able to get from point A to point B. One thing, during Sandy, we had the fire company at the time had a deuce and a half, which is like a big Army military vehicle that we use to evacuate people. And, during that time, we would have to go out and effect rescues for some of those that didn't evacuate. And, when you have the ocean running down the streets as it breached the dunes, that was something that I will never forget. But the vehicles did what they had to do. So it's just a peace of mind knowing that you are in a military vehicle, a high water vehicle, that you can safely, complete your mission that you're there to do.
Now, we've heard about how you prepare with other agencies and also what you encourage your residents to do, but how have you, what have you implemented within your department, and how have you trained your officers to act in, a coastal flooding event or a nor'easter, any type of storm, really?
Yeah, sure. So, kind of all the things that we talked about, that planning that we do, the staffing, we make sure that we bring the staff in before the storm, and, making sure that they know how all the vehicles run, where do you have to go to make sure that the generators are fueled up? Just making sure that not just one person knows what to do in that situation, is that everybody's knowledgeable. Even before the storms, we make sure that our officers are familiar with how to use all the equipment that we'll need during a storm. So really, it's in the police world, we train all the time, and for various situations, regardless of what it is, and and sometimes storms is one of those things. So it's just really continually to educate the officers, and ensuring that they have all the proper tools and knowledge to be able to safely do their jobs.
Well, I did appreciate what you had said before. It's, everyone really has to put their egos aside when it comes to natural disasters or any type of storm, because, it takes a team to really keep everyone safe and do what's right for the community.
Yeah, that's right. And I can speak for Long Beach Island. Like I said, there are, more than one municipality on Long Beach Island. And what I can say is we are all unique, but yet we all work well together. And all the police chiefs, we talk, daily with each other about, various of different things. And, if you're on LBI, you will be very safe and well taken care of.
Absolutely. And I always feel very well taken care of when I'm in LBI, which has been too long. I haven't been in LBI in a while. I gotta change that. I gotta get back up to Harvey Cedars.
Absolutely. Well, you're always welcome.
I appreciate that. All right, so we got a few minutes left. We're gonna end the show as we do every week, which is what is the one thing you can't stop talking about, tidal flooding or otherwise. Chief, you're our guest. You go first.
What's one thing? So, I mean, listen, like I said before, personally, I love the summertime, right? And so are officers. So as soon as, and I'm a warm weather person, I'm a beach person. So as soon as September, October are kind of wrapping up, and we're getting into the winter time, I'm thinking about next summer again. So, hopefully we don't have any tidal flooding situations, but if we do, like we've spoken about, we're well prepared and, here to help.
Awesome. Well said. Palma?
I couldn't agree more. I'm ready for the summer, certainly. And of course, that does, I don't want to think about flooding. I really don't, but I'm not going to stop. So, I'll just keep that in mind. Be ready.
All right. Dan?
I will say with the Memorial Day weekend coming up, just remember from a weather standpoint that of the summer holiday weekends, it's always the iffiest, right? Labor Day's great, the water's warm, unless there's a hurricane. Labor Day's your best bet. July 4th, it's hot, humid, you got thunderstorms. Memorial Day, you could be anywhere from like 40-something in drizzle to 90-something in heat and anything in between. So it's always a gamble planning outdoor stuff on Memorial Day holiday weekend, but regardless of the weather, it's a great time. Start of summer.
Yeah, and Memorial Day 2021 will always stick out in my mind because it was so cold and wet from Friday night all the way to Sunday. That was incredible. Monday was fine, but it was cool. Anyway, I'm going to go with this. I have to now. While recording this, it's not my birthday. When you're listening to this, it is my birthday. So I'm going to give I'm going to give my future self a happy birthday to myself for May 13th.
Now, meteorologist, is that a lot of pressure on you for, Memorial Day weekend, 4th of July weekend to have the right forecast?
No, you got to get the Joe Martucci birthday weather right. Who cares about Memorial Day? You have to give him the good weather.
Hey, listen, man, Memorial Day and my birthday are very similar. I have had 49 and raining, and it's been 85 and humid. So pretty similar. But, we'll see. I don't know what the weather's going to be like for my birthday yet. Let's hope it's 72 and sunny when you're listening to this.
Well, happy birthday, Joe.
Happy birthday. That's great.
Thank you. All right, so we're going to wrap up for this week's episode of Tidal Flooding Talk. Chief Burnaford, we really appreciate you coming on. Tell everybody where they can follow you and what's going on with the police department.
Yeah, thank you very much. We're we're very active on social media. AC Police on Instagram and X or Twitter, X, whatever you call it right now, and Facebook or our website acpolice.org. So hopefully come down and visit us this summer.
Absolutely, yeah. Go over to Harvey Cedars if you haven't. You'll be taken care of. We hope you stay safe this summer, Chief, and we'll look forward to talking to you soon. Thanks again.
Likewise. Thank you, guys.
Thanks, Chief.
Thanks.